First of all, thank you everyone for being here. I'm really looking forward to our session. Both India and Vikram have just the most exciting globally recognized design practices and are really wizards in the field of design as far as I'm concerned. India and Vikram, both of you started your design practice from the ground up at a time when design did not have the cultural spotlight it has today. How did you manage to do that?
As you were saying, 25 years ago, the market was not what it was. And there was no, when I started, I trained as an architect and I started my practice in 1999. And in those days, there was no clear path, clear set system to lead, to create to become an international designer. So you have to invent your own path in a way. And I set my office after training as an architect and being art director at a company called Christian Dieg for 7 years. I decided to open my own practice as an interior designer. It happened that I had a space that was a ground floor space in a little street off Boulevard Saint-Germain, and it had a window. So I started designing projects a bit all over the world, and I was lucky enough to have this, the opportunity to be invited to design in New York, in Miami, in London. But I was working very little in Paris, and I felt very frustrated that there was no connection to the city of Paris. So I decided that because I had this front window, that maybe I would start showing some of my furniture that I was designing for specific projects and showing them in this outlet, and maybe existing physically in a city where I wasn't really working. And as things went along, I opened with my studio. I was, of course, working in many different fields. I decided to, on one street in Paris, as spaces were opening up, I created my own showroom. I created a little space that works like a shop, which is smaller objects. All my furniture and these objects, the furniture is mostly made in France. The objects are issued from know-hows and craft from all over the world. And then I opened 2 other spaces with my studio, of course. One is called the Project Room, which is sort of an open, free space dedicated to inviting it's dialogue, it's inviting galleries, it's inviting different designers to come and show in order to create a community. And the last space is a tiny room where I invite young designers to show their work. So basically, I've created this little ecosystem. And as a designer, what I think is really interesting is that you can create your own path. You can create your own, you can design, as a designer, you can design your own system. And that's kind of interesting to do that.
So it's interesting, India, because in a way you were recognized outside, and then you were then recognized in the city where you lived, and so it was sort of a different kind of a journey to, I think, what Vikram did, because Vikram, you were very much recognized within India, and then you went overseas.
Yeah.
Well, I want to take a step back. I came to the design world from a career in banking. I worked with Morgan Stanley for 6 years in New York and Hong Kong. And then I came back to India in 2000 and co-founded an Ayurvedic cosmetic brand. But I always wanted to return to my first love of working with craft and design and celebrating the authenticity of it internationally. So I started working with brass. There's a history in India of artisanal knowledge of working with brass for surface decoration, for ritual vessels. I'm not an artisan or a designer, but my intervention came from setting up a workshop where there were collaborative energies at work. So we had a whole team of artisans, designers, engineers, and having your own workshop allowed us to push the boundaries, if you will. And
but wasn't it, sorry to interrupt, wasn't it a risk? I mean, as you said, you weren't a designer yourself, but then, to think about brass, to think of setting up an atelier,
I guess the corporate world had pushed me enough into embracing this new world, and I was actually able to bring all what I learned at Morgan Stanley, be it transactional skills, organizational skills, working with the professional environment. I mean, you worked with Monitor Corporation in Boston, and all those skills into the workshop model. And over time, we were able to create our own singular voice. So I don't think there are very many people who do what we do in terms of not only material, but in terms of technique. We work with sheet metal. Most people work with cast metal, and the storytelling. And over time, we were successful here, but internationally, it was really aligning ourselves with Nilufar, one of the world's top design galleries, and with her working the whole rounds of trade fairs and platforms, which gave us a legitimacy as an Indian design entity.
Right. And India, you said that you kind of set up this ecosystem on the street in Paris. And it's interesting because you realize the importance of that window for people to be walking past on the street and then seeing something that then catches their eye. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, it's not so much about the street, it's about existing physically because, when we started out, and probably the same for you, it was way before Instagram, media, and so it's about existing physically. I'm at my little street in Paris is, I think, the least commercial street ever, so it doesn't really make a difference, but I think it's a window. First of all, you have to understand that my work, I'm mainly, I would say, I'm more of an interior designer and architect than furniture designer. Interior design throughout the world, from projects going from the Villa Medici in Rome to an ecolodge in the desert. I put a few examples just to show the different projects that we do throughout the world. And the furniture design is a continuation of the work I do as an interior designer, because it's really like every project allows us to design specific pieces for the project, and so these pieces of furniture are really contextual, which is not exactly what you do, because it's interesting. You have a practice that started with the workshop, with the material, and you design pieces of furniture that are sculptural pieces, so it's between art and design, I would say. And my work as a designer is functional, it's contextual, and it speaks about something else. So it's very different practices, so that was interesting. And as an ecosystem, because that was your question, of having a street, it's not, you're speaking about boundaries, and boundaries happen in many different ways, because you can break your boundaries with working in different countries, of course, cross-cultural, as we speak about. We can break boundaries also with scale, working small objects to larger scale products. So I've designed furniture, but I've also designed buildings, so that's boundaries that you break. And then there's also boundaries about being accessible and non-accessible, meaning working with, I would say, large-scale distribution, which I've done with Monoprix or with H&M, because I like to democratize my work. And then very high-end, when you work with Louis Vuitton or Christian Dior or brands, luxury brands. And for me, it's very important to be able to have, to create this big split where you can work in any different countries with. And in that sense, I think my work is super contextual, and those boundaries are very important to break. And also, the last boundary is collaborations and working together, having dialogue, if it's with craft or people makers, or with other designers, and and collaborations are really, co-creation is super important.
So
It is very much in the same spirit of democratization of craft or accessibility that we launched our lifestyle brand called Viya, which is the studio that works just in metal, but we launched this a year ago as an online brand, but now we're opening a store in Bombay next week. And that cuts across many different crafts in India, available in India, as long as it's artisanal. So we have soft furnishings, we have cane, we have rope, we have the whole embroidery, a whole gamut of things available in India at a much more accessible entry point. Yeah.
And Vikram, you yourself also had dabbled with interiors, had done interiors, but took a conscious decision not to do
To stay
that.
away, because maybe India has been very lucky with her clients. But
What would you
with
mean?
your clients, because here in India, when you're working with the high-end residential clients over time, they develop a confidence where they're telling you what to do. So
You know, you
I
can
found
say,
it challenging.
but you can say that, but also you have the freedom because you design whatever you want. You don't design for a client necessarily. I work with clients. I'm like it's about a conversation, I would say. So it's never just me being free to do what I want.
So I think I agree. The best collaborations occur in an environment where the client gives you trusts the creative process. Mm-hmm. I think that's key.
Yeah, trust is key, but conversation is even better because
that's right. Yes.
Just being free and doing something is not. What's really interesting is the way you do it and the path you take.
And actually, that's a good segue into my next question, which is, I'd love for the both of you to talk about, a project or some work that you've done that has really excited you, that has pushed the limits, or challenged you.
You want to start?
I can start. Okay, the latest project. So every project is challenging. No, don't get it, because where do you start? And the starting point for me is context, and context is often. How do I phrase it? Is I try to define a question I want to answer, and defining the question is the hardest part. And the question, and then makes the question precise, and it's easier to answer, right? So one of the latest projects that was kind of difficult for me because it was very sort of historical and prestigious is a project I did at the Villa Medici in Rome, which is the French Academy. French Academy is a Renaissance building founded by the Medici family, and is very historical because Balthus intervened, Richard Peduzzi intervened. There's murals by Jacopo. It's just incredible. It's really, really amazingly beautiful. And when Sam Sturze asked me to intervene and to redo the first floor, the Piano Nobile of the Villa Medici, you have to kind of answer the question, is like, how do you add beauty to beauty? Can you actually add beauty to beauty? And how do you approach that? And so one of the questions that I answered is like, I'm going to put beauty to a side for the moment, and let me see how I can enhance the experience of the visitor in that context. So here you can see images of the Villa Medici. So for instance, this room was a vestibule that had no furniture. And in one of these rooms that you can see right here, there was a piano of Claude Debussy. So I took the piano out in the vestibule and turned it into a music room. And these are the main bedrooms where I created all the furniture, which is also wood marquetry, manufactured from some of the best craftsmen in France. These are the historical rooms where we just added furniture, and you'll see in the next room I created a huge rug with Aubusson, very famous carpet maker in France, and it represents the garden, a vision of the garden that's outdoor, and I brought it inside. And
I would actually say, India, seeing your intervention at Villa Medici, it makes it that much more accessible because it's a very imposing sort of building and people can feel intimidated seeing all these grand ancient sort of artworks, and then you've done something which is, you know, full of joy and color. I don't know what the response was when, you know, when it was finally unveiled. But.
well, it's been very successful in the sense that those rooms were hardly, they were furnished very poorly in a sense, and actually the policy of Sam, and we'll speak about this later on, Sam Storzé wanted to re-enchant the villa. So it was a whole big program that's still going on where he's having all these young designers intervene, and I was very proud to be the first one to be asked to actually show the path. And yeah, it's been a very good response.
Vikram?
For me, it was the Soul Garden, an installation I showed in Paris last year at Design Miami in the gardens of Karl Lagerfeld's old house. It drew from in ancient Indian belief, Indian belief in animals being sacred with profound spiritual significance. And this reverence has led to in India their veneration and protection for over centuries. And we see animals as flying in the air, the vahanas for the gods, the characters in fables. And there's no other fable perhaps more famous than the Panchatantra, where the animals are characters and there's a moral to each fable. So we developed these 5 animals, a baby elephant, an elephant, a crocodile, a tiger and a tortoise, and each of these, almost lifelike, and each of these had a special compartment where if you opened it, you found the Panchatantra fable illustrated in our Repousse style. And we collaborated with Cecile Tolas, a mutual friend who's an olfactory scientist. And so sprinkled around these animals in the gardens were smells, not fragrances, but smells of how the metal is made, the burning metal, the habitat of the elephant. And the link is that both fables and smell bypass logic. They go straight to memory. So you smell something, and it reminds you of something you've smelled in your childhood, and that's the same with the fables. So, and then we had, every evening, actors from the French drama school enact these fables at 5 o'clock every evening. So this project was very special to me. It brought together, there was this whole cross-cultural, cross-border collaboration.
I must say, first of all, I saw the installation in Paris during Art Basel, and it was a fabulous installation. You saw it earlier on in the gardens. It was not only visually attractive, it was and beautiful. It was an experience because you had all the smells that were activated as you walked around. And then you had these, and the fables, you opened up some of these animals and you had these fables that were evoked. And so this is where I think it becomes really interesting about this project brought together a few key elements that are really part of what design should be about today. It's the craft, the narrative, and the co-creation.
And the co-creation, because we had Cecile, who's Norwegian, based in Berlin. We had the American gallerist. We had the French, and we had India. And it was very important for me. It wasn't just about the animals themselves, but also what they carried inside them. This whole element of spirituality and how we look at animals and what lessons we learn from animals. So it was really that cross-section which was...
It's heritage.
Which was heritage.
It's
and I believe,
heritage. And I wanted to say, because of course I go very quickly about explaining all these projects. When I did the Villa Medici, the beds that I did are, of course, a reference to the Renaissance furniture, beds that are on platforms, because speaking about experience is also about I wanted people to be able to wake up and to have the fantastic view on Rome, because in those rooms the windows are very high up, so you can you
need the raised platform.
You need the raised platforms, and then you go back to all this furniture that was used in the Renaissance period. And I kind of did a pop version of those, you know, it's kind of also a bed in pajamas already, and I kind of like that.
It's interesting how much we think of trying to make our works accessible, because even the animals, they weren't serious. Some of them were quite goofy. The tortoise
Yeah.
is certainly goofy, and
Yeah.
you know, there was a sense of playfulness which you want to bring, because otherwise sculptures can be intimidating. So you know,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would also like to now spend, because I know we've spoken about this quite a bit, is the idea of patronage. Today we're here, we have corporate sponsors, and which is why we're all able to be in this room together. I think it was Sunil Sethi who talked about design being here you have an opportunity for so many people, young creators, as well as established ones, to be able to showcase their wear and, of course, to involve our craft traditions in that. But I know France has a very different approach to patronage. There's a lot of government support, whereas here in India, we have had to kind of go it our own way in a way. Despite, I think the government supports certain aspects, but not to the extent that perhaps one would like to see. So I'd love your opinions on what patronage, both public and private, could offer the world of design.
Well, France, we're very lucky in France to have such a government support in patronage in design and cultural in general. And there is so many there's public support and private support as well. And just to maybe cite a few, because I know there's a French delegation here. And yesterday we had Hervé Lemoine, who's the president of the Manufacture Nationale that regroup the Mobilier National and Sèvres, which are very supportive of the French design. And also they continue to collect design as a government, which is really something, a model that I really feel is fantastic, because they commission young designers, and every year they make acquisitions from young designers to enter their collection. And what happens to this collection is that every ministry, every embassy can go and pick from that collection. And then embassies become embassies of culture as well.
They become the repositories.
Exactly, and I think that's super interesting. And then you have the Manufacture Nationale, which regroups, Sèvres, which is all the ceramic, and you have the savonnerie and the tapestries, which are also incredible. It's all positioned in one entity in France. And then, of course, you have all the villas, the Villa Albertine, the Villa Medici, the Villa... here you have one called Swagatam, I think.
Villa Swagatam.
Yeah.
Villa
Swagatam, which is also about not only supporting culture, but dialogue and cross-culture with the country they're located in, which is really amazing. And then there's a lot of private, I think, enterprises like the l'Intelligence de la Main, with the Fondation Bettencourt-Schuller, which is really incredible, that awards they have three prizes they award every year with an incredible jury, and they reward craft, dialogue, and any sort of museum or enterprise that is supporting design. And these are important prizes in terms of amount of money. There's also, La Villa Noailles in the south of France, which helps discover young talents and puts them out there. And every year they have a prize in fashion, art, design, photography. It's quite amazing. And the last one I would like to mention is also the Atelier Luma by the foundation that is in the south of France in Arles, founded by Maya Hoffman. And what's so interesting, they have come up with a method where they, I think it's a super interesting approach, because they looked at the territory first, and they analyze what the resources are in that territory, the human resources as much as, you know, what's available on the territory, and started designing, creating new materials with those elements on the territory. And then they invite designers to work with those new materials. And it's super interesting. So I would really invite you to come and see all of this. And one of the things they do is, for instance, create 3D printing with algae, or mushroom growing, or it's super interesting. So there's a lot of individual, private initiatives that are from innovation research to discovering, with ending up with, I would say, exhibitions, yearly exhibitions. Of course, there's a huge amount of schools, a huge amount, you know, now all over the territory. So I think it's really ongoing and moving, and I think it's one of the government's interests and priorities to push culture.
I think in India we've had a very good government intervention over the years. It all started under Pupul Jayakar, and you had wonderful institutions like cottage industries. Then you had all the state emporia dedicated to craft. But I think from a design, so you had all the craft centers. From a design perspective, I think perhaps the private sector has, private-public partnerships have been more successful at pushing design to a slightly more relevant contemporary aesthetic. The Jindals are doing a fantastic job with their craft prize. You have the Shakti residency. You have Neela House in Jaipur, where they've assembled a big library of access to weavers and different textiles. So it is, it's happening slowly, but it's happening in the right direction.
I'm sure you would love for the government to be buying a lot of your pieces, Vikram, to send to embassies around.
But no, but I think that's, you know, generally speaking, Europe is really concentrating on craft. And because, as we said earlier, craft is heritage, it's community, it's work, it's so many things.
And it's also stability.
Yeah.
It's also stability and the links to the past.
Exactly.
And links to tradition.
It's
You know,
heritage.
Heritage, absolutely.
But it's also, and you know, if craft is disappearing, it's not because the skills are disappearing. It's because sometimes there's not a proper support.
Yeah, there's not enough patronage. There's not enough
Visibility, and so that's why we're you know, it's so important to let the craft evolve. And for the craft to evolve, it's really about dialogue and how you can have, because sometimes when you have the skill, it doesn't mean that you actually know how to design.
No, absolutely.
And the skill remains a skill, but when you interact with a designer, and actually when I went to visit very quickly the collective, there's, you know, quite a few very interesting skills that have been turned into, and you're the first one, by the way, to be able to do that, is how skill meets design, and then it becomes magic.
So actually, Vikram, you spoke about this. I just want to take a step back. You know, this romanticization of craft, you yourself talked about having a tough time, you know, initially trying to find master craftspeople, finding people who would be reliable in terms of delivery on time, quality control, all of that. So I know that those are challenges we face in India. Could you tell us a little bit about how you overcome that?
Well, there is this kind of romantic idealism of, you know, allowing these things to flourish and the human engagement with artisans, etc. And when I started, I did want these craft clusters we were working with to be self-sustainable. And, you know, we assist them with financing, technique, all of that. And it all worked well until there was a wedding in the family, and then everything shut down. So, you know, you have to kind of balance it out with the wedding in their family. You have to balance it out with the romanticism, with the necessities of the practical necessities. And I think the professionalism, and I think we've managed to do that with our workshop model, where you have the artisans, but they also are operating within a system where there are proper guidelines of quality and timely delivery and all of that.
Thank you
true.
all so much.